Well, thank you for tuning in. This is the F5 Recovery Radio. We're super happy that you're with us. Today, we are looking forward to really sharing some really personal stories and kind of give a little bit about our background, because this is season 3, which we are so grateful that we're able to make all possible to some amazing sponsors, including the F5 Project, the Ridge Treatment and Reentry Center, our brand new hosting sponsor, H&I Nutrition, which provided this amazing space, and of course our continuous sponsor, GoAwayBear.com. We're just looking forward to really connecting, and I'm going to be joined with some amazing co-hosts, and we're looking forward to a good show. So, yeah, what's up, y'all?
Also, the sponsor, HQ Gym, right? Is that what we said? They changed the name from Metroflex to HQ Gym.
Yep.
John Osos.
Yeah, big up John.
Yeah, big up John. That's his new name. Big up
Big
John.
up John.
I thought they called him Big Sexy.
Oh my God.
Do you see those pecs?
Yeah, for real.
Reminds me of that show where he's like, when he's like, you got pecs, I got text. Yeah, he's beast mode for sure. Known John for a while. He's a good dude.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking about today, Ricky?
Yeah, so today, me and Kirsten were kind of talking the other day just about it'd be really good to people, we've been doing the show for months on end, but we have brand new listeners are always kind of tuning in, and I felt like with new season that it'd be really good to kind of reintroduce ourselves a little bit and kind of just get to know, kind of share our stories and let people get to know who we are. Obviously, they know us, they know we're funny, they know we're great, but just how did we get started in recovery, kind of whatever we wanted to share. So, but because I know that can obviously take a lot of time with 4 people, figured that you and
that's why we made sure Scott wasn't here today.
Oh, sorry.
Because we would have had an hour dedicated to it, and he would have used up 55 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then I would have enough time to thank the sponsors. That would have been it.
I'm glad that you love that.
It's so good. Oh my gosh. And then the story with Tony in the window, and it's just so good.
Yeah, I can't wait for him to watch this. He's like, God, Adam, you're so mean.
Yeah, so just kind of doing that.
So we'll let Adam start.
Oh, love that transition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what am I? I'm telling my. Okay, great. Well, I'm on the spot.
Once upon a time.
Yeah. Well, So my mom and dad were in the military. My mom was a nurse, and my dad was a tank operator. We were kind of all over the place. I remember living in Germany. I remember living in Alabama, of course, and then a few other places. But it was pretty young. I don't actually remember either one of them being in the military. I think my earliest memory was in Alabama, and my mom was an ambulance driver. Okay. And I remember her going, with the sirens on, going down the street, and my grandma pointing out that was my mom. That's as far as I can tell, that's my earliest. I was 6 or something like that. My dad had a pretty severe drinking problem, partly because of traumatic events in his past. Sure. As a child, and then also in the military, he went through some stuff that got him discharged, and somebody died or whatever. So, and it was a friend of his and stuff. So, I mean, it seemed to be for my dad, if you look at his history or whatever, it's just kind of breadcrumbs of just traumatic things that have happened, right. And it just kind of, poured over into the family, where, there was violence, there was abuse and stuff. And I don't have a ton of memories of my dad. I think I have one good memory that I remember me and him racing up and down the gym when I was in Cub Scouts, Pinewood Derby, right? He helped me build that car. But outside of that, there's a lot of memories of my mom, my dad not being there. And then when he was there was always something happening, right? Actually another good memory, and then turned to be bad, is that he showed up one time after not seeing him for a couple weeks, and he had a dog, and we always wanted a dog, and then he brought the dog home, and then we had the dog for 4 hours before he had to take it back. Aww. Because my mom was like, we can't even have dogs here, So, and it was and there we were in the van, me, my brother, my dad and this dog, like a white husky.
Okay.
And we were listening to the radio, and then my dad was like singing, and then the dog started howling, singing or whatever. So it was, and so we got really attached in that like 4 hours, and then he had to go back or whatever. So it was, So yeah, he was kind of in and out, and then be in treatment. I think he went to treatment like 12 times in like, I don't know, 15 years and stuff. And we didn't even know what it was, growing up. It was at the VA. And so we would go to the VA like on Sundays and like hang out with my dad.
Yeah.
And I never knew why he was there,
right.
And so then, we go home. So, I mean, childhood was like weird because he was never there or whatever, but it was like pretty calm until he came home. So that was kind of the childhood aspect. He eventually left when I was like 13. He had a bunch of warrants out for his arrest. He made it to Budapest and met a woman over there, had a child. He looks like Freddie Mercury, my dad. And so he was kind of, my stepmom or the woman he married told me that he was kind of popular over there because he looked so much like Freddie Mercury. Yeah. And so he taught English and whatever. And then they came back to Alabama and then he eventually died or whatever, from alcoholism. He had liver cancer. And so it's just a really weird, just a weird life for him, Did
you ever get to know him as an adult? Like you as an adult?
Very briefly.
Yeah.
I went and saw him when I was, I think probably 23 or something like that, okay. 24. Because my second son wasn't born yet, so it was right in between Nick and Brecken, and so I saw him for a little bit, and he was sober, and he had it was kind of weird because he had like a nice big house, and like his wife, and then a kid, and it was just and he had like a pool in the backyard and stuff, and I was just like, it was cool to see him, but at the same time, it was just like, why couldn't you did this stuff before,
right?
So it was just, there was always like this kind of, I don't know, weird vibe between him and I. And then I just, I went back to Fargo, and that was the last time I saw him until I heard that he died, and I went to his funeral. And the funeral was crazy for me because there was like 100 people there that were like crying, and like he had really good relationships with, and it was just weird to me I know now like that that they just had a different experience with him, like they really knew who he was. And in the family he had a lot of trauma with us and a lot of history, so it's really easy to just be like, I hate that man. Right. You know what I mean? And because they didn't have that history with him. And so apparently he was like Mr. Popular, and like people liked him. Yeah. They enjoyed his presence. Yeah. He was like the center of the party, and then he'd come home and just be, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, just completely different. So, so that was kind of cool to see that there was people out there that actually liked him. Yeah. So yeah, then he died. I sobered up about a year after that, in 2013. And prior to that, it was a lot of, I was very similar to my dad. I'd just disappear like on my kids for a long period of time and go to treatment and end up in detox. I was, sleeping on couches. I started going to, recovery meetings when I was around, I would have been like 21 years old. It was back in 2001, I think. It was right after my first son was born. And it was, from 2001 to 2013, I think maybe there was one time I got like a year sober. It was mostly like 3 months in Bolt. I think for me, I was like pretty young, and I could admit that I had like that I did stupid shit when I drank, right? But it was really hard for me to admit that I could not drink. Like I just felt like, because there was always times where I like didn't do anything dumb when I drank or whatever, and I was just like, was hanging with the boys, sitting and having drinks, and then
be normal.
Yeah, yep. I mean, and then I forget obviously that I just kept drinking for 3 days,
right?
But it was like, but nothing dumb happened,
right.
And so I had a hard time like separating that, that my problem was only alcohol, like the way that it affected me, how I was like severely like dependent upon it, like it was. Because there was always bad shit happening in my life. And so I always be like, well, if this bad shit didn't happen, I wouldn't want to drink the way that I drink. Like if I had a good life, I wouldn't drink this way, right? I would want to spend more time with my family or whatever. And so that, I think that was the biggest, for me, that was the biggest barrier to me to getting sober, is that I always viewed my life being shitty, and that's why I drank the way I did. And so when my life got better, I wouldn't, and the problem is that that 100% that wasn't true, because when my life, there was periods of time where my life did get dramatically better when I was still drinking, and it's still, I would just tear it all down, right? And it was stuff that I was doing, it wasn't others. And so when that started in my drinking, when I could like pinpoint that that bad shit happens to everybody, and it has literally nothing to do with my drinking. Like people can go out and have drinks and not do bad shit or have bad shit, and then when the depression kicked in, and then the anxiety, and like I'd just go to, if I didn't drink and I'd try to go to bed at night, I just have severe anxiety that I was like kind of like you feel like the cops are looking for you, but they're not, but it feels like that all the time. Like that was kind of my gut, and then my mind would not shut up. I was thinking about suicide all the time. And so I sobered up in 2013 after a lot of felonies and multiple times in jail. I think I was on probation from the time I was 13 until I was like 29, 31, somewhere in there. Just constantly, like I couldn't do anything. Like it just felt like I was getting locked up all the time for just stupid shit.
It felt like that.
It was that way. It was just a constant like revolving door.
Right.
And in 2013, my last friend, I walked to his house from my place. Like literally nobody was talking. People weren't even like commenting on my Facebook posts anymore. Like it was just like complete separation, and I couldn't see my kids. I lost my job. I was being evicted from an apartment that I wasn't even renting, like it was just, my life was like completely unmanageable. Like there was like it was either drink or die. Like I was at that point, I wasn't showering, nothing. And so this guy and I connected. He was like the last guy I was talking to. He drinks just like me. He was like I had no money, no alcohol. He had some alcohol. And I walked all the way to his house it took me like 2.5 hours to walk to his place, like over the river through, and I got there, and then we sat and chilled and we drank, and the feeling, the good feelings came back or whatever. And then he passed out, and then I got really fearful that I was going to run out of alcohol. And so I stole his alcohol, and I took money from him, and packed it in one of his backpacks, and then walked all the way back to my place, and then eventually, passed out. And the next day he banged down the door. And I didn't know it was him. I thought it was the cops. And I was like, oh, the gig's up.
Here we go.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I can't see anything through the peephole. I open the door, and it's him, and he's there with a gun and demanding his shit back. And it was like, I can still remember the feelings I had at that time. It was like, I was like weirdly serene in that moment. Like almost like I just wish he would, and so, I was like, I'll give you your stuff. And I walked over and I grabbed the bag and I pulled the bottle out of the bag and put it behind the chair. And then I brought it to him and he searched through it and he's like, where's the bottle? And I was like, I didn't take the bottle. Like I was like, and it didn't register with me until like many years later that like, even in the face of like a gun,
Right.
I'm
Still.
wanting to drink,
Right.
you know, and am willing to apparently die for it.
Right.
And then he just, you know, he walked away. And so small world, that gentleman, messaged me after, cause I did this talk on another show. And then they clipped it and you know, we posted it or whatever. He messaged me, like a month ago.
No kidding.
Yeah. And he was just like, I was like, dude, we should, you know, cause it wasn't like, I mean, that's just how the world exists at that, you know, that level and of drinking and drugs and whatever. I got no resentments, you know, against him. And I mean, I've done crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, and I was, he's like, I heard you're writing a book. And I was like, yeah, I am. And I was like, we may need to get coffee because you're going to be in it, you know?
Yeah.
And he was like, I'd love that. And plus the other reason is that I don't know, like this story that I just told you, I don't know how 100% factual it is.
Right.
It happened over 11 years ago, you know, and
You were still drunk.
and I was still drunk. You know, like there was like, so I want to make sure that like his perspective and mine are the same in that moment. So anyways, yeah, so we reconnected and
That's cool.
I made amends to him, you know, via messenger and then, you know, we're going to get together soon. So it was just really cool that
He shows up with a gun.
yeah.
Things are
Here to
not good.
finish the job. So that's how, I mean, so that next day, I woke up and it was just like, it was just like a moment of clarity of like, you know, that moment and all the robberies and all the, you know, not seeing my kid, like everything just hit me that next day. Which had happened 1,000 times before. There was no real difference. And so I walked down to the payphone and I called, Andre, and asked him if he would, you know, help me. And, you know, long story short, I walked to his place, which took about 2.5 hours, the same as that to go get the alcohol. And that was like one of my first lessons is that, like the whole way to Dude's house to go get drunk, I was like happy, go lucky. I can't wait to get there. You know, I'm probably walking harder than I normally, you know, like, and when I went to Andre's house, I was like bitching and complaining. And it was just like, and it all started with that. I just had this thought was like, why don't you just put like an ounce of that effort that you do to get into like getting drunk, getting high, getting whatever into your recovery and just see what happens. And that was the start was, the realization of how much effort I put into alcohol in comparison to recovery. And I had never, not once would I had ever walked 2.5 hours to go get sober.
Right.
Or to go to a meeting or to go, you know, because I'd be like, oh, the meeting's only an hour long.
Yeah.
The travel's going to take longer than the meeting. You know, it was always justifications. And so that day it wasn't really any different. I bitched and complained the whole way there, but I just kept going. And then eventually I got to his place and since that day, I feel like that 2.5 hour walk to his place was the hardest mentally for me when it came to wanting to drink, that I had to deal with in the last 11 years. And it was like, it got it all out of my system. You know, like, I mean, I've thought about drinking. I've even had suicidal thoughts in the last 11 years. Like, I don't think I'm immune to life,
Right.
you know? But that last 3 months and that first 2.5 hours of that walk, it was probably the hardest time in my entire recovery. So, I mean, that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's no there was no real magic bullet or like it was. I had made that decision to get sober, that same one 1,000 times, and the only difference is that I just kept walking. You know, because it was, and then when I was walking, I was like, man, I know where all the trap houses are, the bars. Like, I'm like, it was like a radar. Right. Yeah. Like, I could have just stopped at the liquor store. I mean, it wasn't any issue for me to like walk into a liquor store and steal some shit and leave. Like, it wasn't hard to get alcohol for me. Like, I was willing to break laws to get it. And I just kept walking that straight line all the way to his place. Because I was like on 25th Street and he lives at like almost the end of 25th Street. Right. And I was on it in South Fargo and he was in it in North Fargo. So it was like one straight line to his house. Had it been like any turns, you know, like I think and so, yeah, that's where I came from. And then, you know, I got a good job and eventually got a car and then got my kids back and was really, really active in recovery. Probably my first, 5 years, like 4 or 5 years. So it was just like super, super like, and then I think the one thing that recovery does is which is like its double-edged sword, is that it gives you a life, but then that life gives you a ton of responsibilities. And so it's like, went from going to like 4 to 5 meetings a week and sponsoring a bunch of guys and going to whatever roundups and conferences and just bleeding recovery to now I can't make it. I got my kids this weekend, or my job's taking me out of town, so I'm going to go to a meeting there. I got like that's the double-edged sword of recovery. It's just like it's almost impossible to stay as active in your recovery as it was when you had no responsibilities. Right. People be like, "You want to go to a meeting tonight?" I don't know. Oh, what do you got going on? Nothing. Well, I guess I'm going. Now it's like I'm out of town and or whatever. So, but yeah, it's a pretty good life, especially since the start of F5 and more kids. Yeah, it's really good. It's all, and all the stuff that we do today was like the barriers that we help people with today were like the exact same barriers that existed when I got sober, like trying to find an apartment, but I'm a felon, trying to get a job, but I'm a felon, trying to, build up enough money to get a car. I got to get my IDs. I got to get my birth certificate. Like all that stuff was like firsthand knowledge. And I think that's why it was so easy to like create, because it was like the same problems everyone was having. Right. So yeah, that's my story.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's interesting how, do you see your dad different now that, because your life kind of mirrors his?
Yeah.
Like you're both sick, and then you have those bursts of reform where you want to be a part of your family's life and just get sucked back into being sick. You know what I mean?
I think I was probably maybe a couple of years sober, going through the process of the steps and stuff, that I started identifying that a lot of the things that my dad did were similar things that I did, and I think like for my dad, the only real difference between me and my dad is that like after he got sober, he built up his life or whatever, and then he eventually drank and died. For me, it was very similar. The past, the sober, the building up or whatever. I am not mad at my dad or resentful at him anymore, because I can see why he decided to leave.
Sure.
It was like he had came to a point, because I've made that decision. I actually made that decision with my first kids, or my second kid's mom, when I was in treatment, and I was on pass, and she came and picked me up, and I was staying the weekend at her place, which used to be our place, right? And I remember I was watching TV. Like, she went above and beyond. Like, she went and got me movies and food, and just so badly wanted me to stay sober. Like, was like above and beyond. And she had been that way through the whole drinking and sober, drinking and sober. and just stuck by me that whole, time. And I remember being on pass, like being gone through all that stuff and on pass from treatment, and still wanting to drink so bad that, like, I remember like evaluating I was like, I'm going to ruin everyone's life around me if I stay here.
Right.
And I called the guy, and I ended up at some hotel and got arrested again or whatever while I was on pass from treatment. And but the decision that I made that day was that that I needed to get out of their lives if they were going to have good lives. And I remember after I got sober, I mean, it was a horrible decision.
Yeah.
Sure.
But when you're like in that moment, like it feels like it's the only way that people are gonna, like, I would rather people at that time have hated me because I left than because that I'm abusive.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I think that's where my dad got to, because one of the last times I saw my dad was he was getting violent with my mom. And it was always after he came back, so it was like, and I went through this like trauma-informed care training or whatever. And they told me, they were like, it's a week-long training. You're going to be crying by Wednesday, so they call it the dip day or whatever. And I was like, and so Wednesday came and went or whatever. I was like, I'm fine. And then Thursday I was bawling like a baby because we were talking about anger and family and stuff like that. And I thought for the longest time that I was like more resentful at my dad than I was at my mom. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that might be true, like for the one reason that I'm really mad at him for leaving and, abandoning us. But I'm mad at my mom for a lot more things because she was there. So now I take that idea of like all those things, and if it would have been my dad and the type of way my dad would have been, because I'm like mad at my mom for dumb kid shit. You know what I mean? I would have been mad at my dad because he was like beating the shit out of my mom.
Right.
Or us, or being verbally like extremely abusive and manipulative and whatever. And so like when I think about when my dad left or whatever, it was because he didn't want that to happen. Right. And just be mad at him for not being there. Right. And you could be like, well, you can be mad at, well, you didn't even try, or whatever. He just knew that he probably was never going to be sober. Yeah. And so when I took that moment, and then that moment I was in treatment, and I realized I made the decision to leave so that basically I didn't turn into my dad to them, because I was going to. I remember I sat there for probably a good hour contemplating it at the table, back and forth. And then finally I just got up and walked out. Right. And that was the real last time that, her and I had any real, relationship conversation, like any of that stuff. So, 100%. Like
it's an illness that I'm sure you just realize at some point, this has me and I can't be here and be the man I want to be. So I'm just going to dip out because I cannot make this better, this illness or whatever. Yeah.
And my dad never, when he made the decision to like leave and never came back, like all the times that, if we did have a conversation with him and like we, busted his balls about leaving, like just were mean to him about it and stuff, he never talked back about it. He knew when he left that there was going to be a lot of collateral consequences of that decision with family, with the people around, and he just took it because I think he knew deep down that it would have been a lot worse if he stayed.
Sure.
And it's, you hear about dads leaving all the time, and you hear people, oh, he's not a real father and this and that, whatever. Yeah. But there's a good chance that some of those guys, if they would have stayed around, they'd probably be in prison for murder or, some kind of abuse or whatever, that they just, we tell kids all the time, if you're about to get in a fight, walk away and go find a teacher, you know what I mean? But if it's in a marriage, you're just like, you're a piece of shit. Yeah. And you're like, he left because like he just, and I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that there's always an explanation,
Just this shame.
we just may not like it. Like, I don't like that my dad left, but I get it.
Right.
you know, so.
Because most often people that love someone with an addiction, their first question is, why are they doing this to us? You know, why are they doing these behaviors that has nothing to do with their addiction? But it all does. It's all like this snowball effect. And it's hard to explain, like, they can be two things at once. You know what I mean? They can absolutely love you and want to give you everything and be, you know, in the middle of this addiction that just takes them away from it, you know? Anyway, it's just hard to explain, but.
Yeah. Well, all around it's hard. Like, everything's hard to explain why addicts act the way they do. And it's hard to, like, tell family members, it's like, it's not you.
Yeah.
Right? Because what they see, it's kind of like when my dad at his funeral, all those people were, like, sad and, like, missed him and wanted him around and stuff. And then I'm there, like, angry and I'm glad he's dead.
Right.
You know? It's hard to, like, not take it personally because you don't see him doing it with anyone else. You know, it's like, well, I'm your family. Why are you treating me this way? And it's just like, you know, it's just hard to explain because it's like, well, I mean, my dad hated being around us because it was a constant reminder of all the shit that he did.
Right.
And then you know, you have people who are constantly reminding him, right? So he's just, like, constantly in this traumatic state of mental health every time he's around his family. So of course he's going to not be well, you know? If I had to, it's kind of like if we decided to change the court system and the criminal or the defendant has to live with the prosecutor and the judge.
Yeah.
And then the public defender is like their buddy that lives down the street, right? Where are they going to, they're going to be with their public defender. He's the only person advocating for him or isn't bringing his shit up all the time. He's telling him, he's like, let's not talk about it. You know, don't bring that up in court, you know? And so it's just, it turns into just a very adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody wants to be in that.
Right.
But it's cool too that you had kids during different times of your life where you're at different places. And so what you're emotionally able to give one is different than the other when you're in recovery, you know? So anyway, it's just cool to see. And I love that your boys to hang out with you and they dig you.
Yeah.
So when you, like, you mentioned about, like, recognizing that, wow, I did the same thing my dad had to do to just, you know, for clarity and saving yourself. Did that trigger any sort of, like, I need to make amends? I need to, like, talk to my mom. I need to, like, do anything there to kind of re-heal again as you're realizing this from that?
When I first got sober, there was, part of my recovery was, like, you know, whenever I found myself over at her place or her mom's place or whatever, like, I would do the dishes. Like, I wouldn't even, like, I would see the dishes in the sink, I just do them. Right. Or, and I didn't, like, it wasn't like it was probably weird for them at first because it was like we hadn't seen you in years, and then you're showing up and now you're, like, doing the dishes at my mom's house, you know, at my grandma's house or whatever, and then or shovel the driveway or whatever. I just, like, if there was something that I could do, I'd just do it, and I wouldn't, like, expect anything in return, or, you know, I didn't make sure that they knew that I did it or anything like that. So it was like that first probably 4 years was that way, and then. You know, and my son was, from that point on until now, has been coming over every weekend and hanging out with me and stuff. I wouldn't say that those relationships with any, so I have 3 baby moms or whatever, like, and I'm just not, you know, just not that guy that, like, is Mr. Fantastic when it comes to relationships. I'm 100%, like, I'm just, it's something that I'm still working on. And anyway, I've accepted that I've hurt them mentally, and there's a lot of resentment there. And so outside of that first 4 years, I don't really do much anymore. Okay. You know, it's, we just kind of, it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of like the criminal and the prosecutor being like, they didn't do there's nothing I can think of that they did that was anything like what I did to them.
Right.
You know, so it's, you know, I'm not saying that all these relationships that both sides were, or one side was perfect and the other one wasn't.
Right.
But in comparison, it's just
Sure.
like, you know, you got mad at me, might be nagging at me or something like that, and I'm stealing cars and took your debit card, and you know what I mean? Like, it was just, it's vastly different.
And it's hard to explain that behavior is not personal.
Right, yeah, right.
I do that to anybody because I'm sick. you
Yeah.
know?
Right. And I did. Like, I mean, like I stole other people's cars and shit. So it's
Just to make it even.
right. But you know, it's like early on with F5, I got a lot of shit from like victim advocates or whatever. They're just like, you know, you help felons and you do this and that. Oh, but what about the victims and stuff? And I'm like, it's a legit question. Like, what do we do for them? Well, I think that us helping people not commit crimes is probably the best way to help victims, because they would not be a victim if it wasn't for the crime or that person, right? And so what better way than to work with kids and work with, you know, people who have committed crimes or whatever, to not do it.
Right.
So, or not do it again to that person. And so I think that's my role, right?
What did they want you to do? I mean, make them apologize, or I don't get.
I mean, I get it. The justice system is not very pro-victim. You know, they're just, a lot of times they're just trying to get a conviction, get them in jail, and get, you know, whatever.
Right.
And that's their way of like victims' rights, is like where it's justice, right? But there isn't really any justice, right? Because you still have to deal with those feelings. You still have to deal with like something bad happened to me. You know, the prosecutor doesn't return my calls. You know, like they don't really care.
Yeah.
Right. It's just at the end of the day, it's all a game in the courtroom, right?
Yeah.
Like what side's going to win,
Right.
you know? And once that is over, they don't think twice about it. They just move on to the next case, right? It's a business at the end of the day.
It's
Yeah.
their job.
Yeah. And so it's not very the justice system isn't really pro-victim or pro-criminal, right? Like it's just a business at the end of the day that has to get a job done and check the box and move on to the next thing. And so I can see why they're just like, I'm still hurting, you know, like they owe me thousands of dollars or whatever, like, and I'm going to get it back in $50 increments when they took 10,000 in one shot. Like, it's not fair.
Well, life's not fair.
Yeah, and so
nobody's responsible for your happiness and blah blah blah. I could totally.
But what I'm saying is that I'm not like, I don't know what it's necessarily like to be a victim like that or whatever. I know what it's like to be a criminal, and I know what it's like to make amends and make things as right as you possibly can.
Right.
And I think that's better use of my time than anything else. I wouldn't even know how to help outside of helping someone pay back their fees faster, you know, or whatever. So the reason I'm bringing that up is that that's very similar to the relationships that I've had, is that I've been the criminal in this relationship and they've been the victim, right? And now we're trying to like have a relationship
Right.
when their idea of justice and my idea of justice is different.
Right.
You know, you know, I can go and say I was wrong. I can pay back all the stuff that I owe you, you know, but I can't repay the feelings. I can't repay that the event never happened. I can't make it cease to exist, you know. And for many in that like particular like baby mama and dad, like it's just, it's real. That's probably the hard, out of all the things that I've seen on relationship reparations, the ones, the people who are no longer couples that are co-parenting or trying to parent together after being through very traumatic, like that one is probably, in my opinion, the hardest out of all of them, because you're not related.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you don't have to talk to each other. Like it's, you know, and society usually paints a picture of them not getting along, you know, so it's, and they feel like they're owed a debt and they never got it paid back. So,
and then that's something to continue to work on though, right?
Yeah, I'd try, you know, I'd be respectful, give space, you know, like try not, like the guys that I mentor when they're trying to like repair that relationship, you know, is the same that, and from, you know, the same direction that I got was just be of service, be nice, be respectful. Don't, if they're not doing something that you don't want, or you want them to do or something, like not letting you see your kid or whatever, you don't have to like go to courts like right away. Like you can try a variety of different ways, like be of service, shovel driveways, whatever. See how it works. You know, if it doesn't work, then yeah. But don't, if you get mad at him, don't send 30 text messages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I know,
repetitively
so
call
unhealthy.
them, and you know, and like stalk them essentially because they're not doing what you want them to do. Like that was probably the best piece of advice, was it's not about them.
Right.
It's about me
Right.
and doing what I need to do to get to where I want to be in life without hurting others.
Yeah.
You know, sending 30 text messages in 2 minutes, it's hurtful.
Right.
Yeah.
It's scary, and it, you know, but
What
you
kind
don't
of
think that.
environment are you creating for your kids in
Right.
doing that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like, hey, you're amazing and I love you, and then you're just like staring at the mom. You know, it's like
Right.
you're being a piece of shit, man, and it's just gonna have a ripple effect. They see it, and so that's probably really all I do now, is I just try to be respectful and keep that space, because it's a lot, right? If I had to be around someone I didn't like all the time, I wouldn't be a very happy person,
Right.
you know.
But
So.
you'd be a grown up. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, your problems are not why you're unhappy. And I think the victim, like as the victim, you will never make the perpetrator pay the way you want them to pay. You want, because you want them to pay on like this deeper level where something was taken from you and all that stuff. And I think that you get to a place where you're like, okay, even if they showed up, let's say everybody that wronged me, everybody that did something that makes me, that I took personal, showed up and said, I'm sorry. You know, even them taking, you know, not credit, I don't know what, responsibility for what the behavior was, I still feel the same. So that is all on me to fix, you know? And so it does no good. The only freedom for me is to forgive, you know, and wish them the best life. But it takes a while to figure out that even if you were given all the things that you think you want, it's still between you and you know what I mean? Which is good news, because you can fix that, you know?
Right.
Anyway.
Ultimately, there does come a time where it is the responsibility of the victim to overcome whatever it is that they're right. But that's like a hard like conversation to have with someone. That's why I think like people who are, you know, like for us, it was originally like felons working with felons. And I think this is why, you know, victims should work with victims. Like they got to have an identity in it, because if like, it's easy for me to be like, hey, Mr. Victim, you need to get over your shit, suck it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People would be like, you're an asshole.
Especially if you're the one who did it.
Right. Especially if I'm the one that did it. Right. And so, it's just, there's a place for people to get help, you know, in that. I mean, like AA has AA and then Al-Anon, you know, because, you know, most of those men and women in Al-Anon went through some traumatic shit with their loved one, right? They did shit too. I'm not, you know, whatever. But like I said earlier, there's like a big unbalance between the amount of shit. And then they just become like so addicted to the idea of like their person like becoming a better person or not drinking or whatever. Their whole identity it becomes like their identity.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's reparations that need it, but eventually they, you know, I'm not going to say they need to just get over it, but they need to. I mean, what's a life living if you're constantly just unhappy because somebody wronged you?
Right.
And like the choices you make today make for the person you are tomorrow, or whatever that saying is, I don't even know. But if surround yourself with people that are in the same situation, that motivate you to be a better person, that try and move you in a healthy direction. Because you can sit with people and bitch about it and just get sicker and sicker, and then you just feel awful. Or, you know, you can be with people that can love you while you walk through this, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the choice you have initially.
Yeah, it's a hard conversation to have because it's like, it's like talking about giving guys opportunities as they get out of prison and public safety. It's like, they're like, I guess I just have to go to prison if I want to start a business and whatever. It's like, well, no, or we are just trying to help people so that they don't do what they did before. And then there's another guy complaining. Right. You know what I mean? Like, not complaining, but another person hurt. Public safety. I think the fastest way to public safety is to give opportunities for them to like not go back to the life that they were living before, and then help replicate that. But it's hard to, when you've been wronged. Everybody wants grace for themselves, so they want justice on others. Somebody else does something wrong, they look at them. If they do the same exact thing, it's like, oh, but can I have a second chance? It's like,
it's situational.
Yeah, so you won't really fully understand until you're in their shoes.
Yeah.
And that goes for all directions, whether it's criminal, victim, law enforcement, being a judge. I can't imagine being a judge and having to make decisions to lock people up for 20, 30 years and then retiring and realizing that there's a whole prison filled with people that you locked up for. And then, 10 years later, they change the law and those people are getting half the time that they were getting before. And then you have to sit with that you locked them up for twice as long. Like I don't think I could be outside of like a murderer or a rape, you know what I mean? But like if I'm like making decisions about a person who I know he's here because he has a severe drinking problem, but he broke the law, and now I have to lock him up because of mandates set by legislators that have never been in a courtroom. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would probably have a really hard time. Like you'd have to be a sociopath or a psychopath of some kind to just like lock people up all the time and not have some remorse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know. And then how much is like you give them grace because it's an illness, and how much of it is like you were a dick. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A judge's job, very. I couldn't imagine being a judge or a prosecutor or, any of that. Just the idea, like people's lives in the palm of your hand. You went out and got drunk and stole a car and hit somebody. Right. And now you're in front of a judge and he's going to, for that 5 minutes that you did, you just lost 20 years of your life.
Yeah. I know, it seems so crazy.
Or you took, like we used to have disparities in sentencing between crack and cocaine. Like,
for dumb.
Ricky shows up to court with possession of crack, or maybe he put it in some little baggies and sold a couple of them or whatever, and he's going to prison for 20 years. I go to court for cocaine, did the same exact thing, and I get like a fraction of the time. And it's literally like almost like it's powders at the end of the day. Yeah. So it's, and now they're changing that stuff. And my first thought is like, what about all those people that served 20 years until legislators came in and changed the rule to like, now it's going to be similar to cocaine and you're going to have to serve a couple of years. What about all them? Are they victims now?
Right.
Of the system?
They can't function in society. They've been locked up for 20 years, you know? Yeah. Good.
Look at it now. You're still on the straight and narrow. Oh,
okay, Scott.
I thought it was
good. All right. Good. I mean, it was good.
Well, in respect to Scott not being here, we'll tell a dad joke quick.
Okay, do.
What do you call a happy cowboy?
I don't know.
A Jolly Rancher.
Oh my gosh, that's the best.
So I want to thank you so much, Adam, for just sharing that amazing personal story. And of course, I want to thank our amazing sponsors, the F5 Project, the Ridge Treatment and Reentry Center. Of course, our brand new host sponsor, H9 Nutrition and HQ Gym, as well as our most recent and continuous sponsor, GoAbear.com, for just sponsoring this next season. Join us next week. We're going to have Kirsten be sharing her personal story. 55 minutes. That's the record to beat. So, hope you can do it. But most importantly, have a great day in recovery, y'all.